So we have Professor Milan Vodopivec here. He was a lead economist at the World Bank from 2004 to 2007 in Sri Lanka. He has also been the Undersecretary to the Ministry of Labour at Slovenia. So he has a lot of experience working with labour market issues both in Sri Lanka and in Slovenia. So we are very happy to have him here today to talk about maybe some recommendations on how to improve access to permanent jobs in Sri Lanka, or also improving the flexibility of the Sri Lankan labour market, because that is one thing that is keeping us from becoming more competitive according to all the global indices that are out there. So, Milan.
Thank you, Nisha. It's my pleasure to be back. As you mentioned, I spent 3 years in Sri Lanka working on labor market issues, and of course, doing so, one cannot but study the TEVA regulation, that legislation. In fact, we had a report at that time, and since then I have worked quite a lot on also in other countries, but certainly recently we evaluated the impacts of the recent introduction of a new labor law in Slovenia, and that law I think has some important implications for Sri Lanka. The Slovenian labor market has been traditionally quite segmented. What we are talking about is not so much formal, informal, but workers are being employed on a permanent basis, permanent contracts, and some are employed on a fixed-term basis, and so obviously fixed-term workers have much less job security. And the government of Slovenia tried to change that by introducing a new labor law in 2013, and we did analysis of the effects, and it showed that it did indeed reduce the segmentation, the duality of the labor market, by increasing the access of workers to permanent contracts. In particular, the probability of conversion of fixed-term contracts to permanent, that is to stay with the employer, that increased. And also the access of unemployed workers to permanent jobs increased following the introduction of the law.
So what were the specific features of this reform? Could you just maybe...
The law had several features, but perhaps the most important ones are that it kind of reduced the costs of separating permanent workers. It did so by reducing the amount to be paid, the advance notification period, but perhaps more importantly, it also reduced the procedures that were due to do so, and helped increase the predictability. These are precisely the features, I think, that are really very problematic in the Sri Lankan context, and as I mentioned, so it is both Slovenian changes helped to improve the access of permanent jobs, of better jobs, but it also in particular helped vulnerable groups, both young workers and old workers, more than other groups. So it also helped on this kind of on this particular vulnerability front. So taking that knowledge, if you will, to Sri Lanka, and knowing the procedures that TEVA requires, it looks to me that the divide between the formal and informal sector would be at least somewhat reduced had the protection of that TEVA offers been reduced, and in two particular aspects. One is reducing the government interference in the decision making of firms and the procedures that requires. And two is also in the process of conflict dispute resolution, easing making the process less complicated. That would also help.
So you have also worked on unemployment insurance schemes that are more suitable for less developed countries like Sri Lanka. You want to talk a little bit about that? I think that.
Yeah, that is my pet subject.
Yes, please. Yes.
I recently actually published a paper on how to introduce unemployment insurance to developing countries, and indeed I think this is
so maybe perhaps you could first tell us why it is difficult to introduce OECD type of unemployment insurance schemes for developing. What are the issues?
Yeah. Indeed, the labor market of developing countries is very different, and also the nature of unemployment is very different. I would say that, in developing countries, you may be unemployed just a little bit and be employed informally, and so do this kind of a seamless transitions very easy. In fact, in developed countries, it is not possible. You just cannot do that for taxation reasons, for the different rules. And so anyway, if we think about really introducing unemployment insurance to developing countries, it would one adjustment I think that's useful is about how to monitor. So it would be very useful to avoid personal monitoring of job search, and instead try to introduce certain schemes that kind of self-monitor. And what I have in mind is particularly a so-called hybrid system that is in place in some countries, and that consists of contributions being paid to two accounts. One is the individual account of worker, one is to the solidarity fund. And when the unemployment compensation is being paid out to a worker, so the worker first is compensated from his own account, his or her account, and that takes care or improves the incentives for a worker to take a job in certain cases. And of course, if the individual account doesn't suffice, there would be a solidarity fund that would actually allow pretty much the unreduced the payment of unemployment insurance.
So thank you, Milan, and maybe do you have any papers or something that we can
yes,
I have more on
yeah, I
this?
have just recently finished a 2-year project financed by European Union that has several empirical pieces on the working of the Slovenian labor market, but also has survey articles about how to activate workers, unemployed workers, about how to increase the employment of older workers, how to help the long-term unemployed. So these are all could be found at the Slovenian Labor Ministry website.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Nisha. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yes.